people study it constantly. They climb mountains, they dive to the ocean floor, and explore dense forests. By the 21st century, it might seem like there are no more mysteries left on Earth. But that's not true. One of the most mysterious places on the planet is North Sentinel Island, in the Bay of Bengal. But Joe Rogan, famous communicator, in his recent podcast unveiled what's happening on the North Sentinel Island. You might even get to know one of the most mysterious tribes on Earth, but it's better to do so virtually. What Joe Rogan reveals changes everything.
Uncontacted tribes. Like, do you know about the gentleman who was the missionary who visited North Sentinel Island?
Yeah.
And was killed by the natives. North Sentinel Island, which is a really unusual place because they branched off from Africa 60,000 years ago, and they've been living on this one small island the size of Manhattan. And as well as we know, there's only about 39 of them left, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And we're not supposed to contact them. Like, people are not supposed, we're supposed to, like, leave them alone.
First, a few facts. You've probably heard of North Sentinel Island. It's one of the many islands in the Indian Ocean. Not very large, about 60 square kilometers, or 23 square miles. However, this island is completely closed to the public. Neither tourists nor nearby residents can go there. Even scientists aren't allowed. But why is this place so infamous? It's not because of poisonous spiders, snakes, or an ancient curse. This island is home to the most unusual people on Earth. Between 15 and 400 people live on this small piece of land, and the spread isn't accidental. There are no visitors on North Sentinel to count the people and keep records. The local population can't read or write. These are just assumptions because there is no confirmation. Scientists can only speculate and observe from afar. In such a situation, modern technology, like satellite images, might help, but even this fails. The island is covered in dense forests, hiding everything except the shore. It's impossible to see through the vegetation. Theoretically, anything could be hidden there. Living dinosaurs, traces of an alien civilization, the underground city of Atlantis. Why not? Little is known about the people who live on this island, called the Sentinelese. They are one of the Andaman indigenous peoples that have lived in near total isolation for about 60,000 years, according to scientists. The Sentinelese have developed independently since primitive times, without contact with the rest of the world. They have no idea about Bitcoin, global warming, or Netflix. They don't even know what a horse is. Some researchers have managed to glimpse the natives. They describe the local residents as relatively short, about 165 centimeters or 5.5 feet tall, possibly due to island dwarfism. Scientists also noted their dark, shiny skin, even teeth, and strong muscles. Despite the millennia, the Sentinelese are still hunter-gatherers. The tribe likely uses bows, arrows, and spears to hunt land animals and collect seafood by hand, such as crabs and shellfish. It's believed that they eat these in large quantities, as their settlements are full of empty shells. Some of their practices have not developed since primitive times. The Sentinelese people do not engage in agriculture, though they can build canoes. Interestingly, it's unclear if they know how to make fire, although they use it. The Sentinelese live in small, temporary huts, appreciate metal, dance, and speak an unknown language. Scientists are eager to learn about them, but it's forbidden. North Sentinel Island is officially administered by India, but there is no agreement between the natives and the government. Indian authorities ensure the Sentinels are not disturbed due to their isolation and lack of immunity to common diseases. Even brief contact could spread disease quickly and be deadly for the tribe. In the 19th century, British officer Maurice Vidal Portman studied the island's inhabitants in ways that were far from humane. He kidnapped 6 sentinels and took them to the nearest major city. The natives soon fell ill, and 2 adults died. Portman returned 4 sick children to the island and left them on the beach. Despite such experiments, the tribe survived. Today, the island is protected to prevent diseases from the mainland from reaching it. Indian Border Patrol boats ensure no one comes within 9 kilometers, about 5 nautical miles, of the island. The Sentinels deliberately avoid contact with the outside world and react aggressively to outsiders, even resorting to violence. There have been a few peaceful contacts, the first in 1991, but visits to the island stopped in 1997. After the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake, an Indian government helicopter sent to check on the islanders was met with stones, spears, and arrows, showing they were okay. Scientists believe the Sentinelese hostility is a sign of the physical and cultural stability of their community. Despite official bans and risks, people are still drawn to North Sentinel Island. In October of 2018, a 26-year-old American man arrived in Port Blair, the capital of the remote Andaman Islands in India. However, Port Blair was not his final destination. He spent the next 11 days in isolation there to ensure he was free of any infectious diseases. His next goal was both simple and highly complicated. He planned to bribe local fishermen to take him to a place that seemed like another world entirely. Port Blair is a modern city with over 140,000 residents, a major naval base, and more than a dozen direct flights to various cities in India. It's well connected to the global world, with flights from New York City costing less than $2,000 and from London less than $1,000. However, just 50 kilometers west of Port Blair lies North Sentinel Island, a largely untouched remnant of humanity's distant past, covering nearly the entire surface, making it invisible from above. It's home to the Sentinelese, a small hunter-gatherer tribe that has lived in isolation for tens of thousands of years. They remain unaware of the world beyond their island and know nothing more advanced than bows and arrows. For them, life is much the same as it was 20,000 years ago. They are unaware of the modern city of Port Blair, just 50 kilometers to the east, with its regular Airbus flights. The tribe is often considered uncontacted, a rare living remnant of humanity's distant hunter-gatherer past that remained isolated throughout thousands of years of human history and technological development. North Sentinel Island is vastly different from our world, but that hasn't stopped people from trying to interfere. Over the centuries, many have tried to contact the Sentinelese, but all attempts have failed, because the Sentinelese usually attack anyone who tries. They see our attempts to interact with them as we would see an alien invasion, responding with aggression. To respect the tribe's clear desire to remain isolated, the Indian government has enforced a 3-nautical-mile-wide no-go zone around their territory, patrolled by the Indian Navy. This is the area John Allen Chow, a 26-year-old American, attempted to enter when he flew to Port Blair in 2018. His goal was to spread Christianity to the tribe, a mission that ultimately cost him his life and could have unknown effects on the Sentinelese. His fatal journey garnered worldwide headlines and became one of the most discussed events of 2018. To grasp the full story, it's essential to understand how the Sentinelese became so isolated from the outside world in the first place. Initially, it was believed that they descended directly from the earliest modern humans who migrated from Africa to Asia around 50 to 75,000 years ago. However, recent studies suggest that humans reached the Andaman Islands approximately 26,000 years ago, during the last glacial maximum, when lower sea levels connected the islands to modern-day Myanmar. Over time, as glaciers melted and oceans rose, the Andaman Islands became isolated, trapping Paleolithic hunter-gatherer tribes like the Sentinelese. They remained largely cut off from the outside world for millennia. Occasionally, kingdoms and empires from India and Southeast Asia might have sent expeditions to the Andaman Islands for diplomacy or slave raiding, but due to the lack of historical records, we can't confirm these occurrences. Regardless of their frequency, the indigenous Andamanese remained Paleolithic hunter-gatherers, isolated on their islands until 1789, when a British ship arrived, revealing the existence of the wider world. The British aimed to establish a penal colony for convicts, rebelling against their rule in the subcontinent, eventually leading to the development of modern-day Port Blair. Upon the ship's arrival, there were approximately 7,000 uncontacted indigenous people on the Andaman Islands belonging to various tribes, including the Shompen, Jarawa, Anji, and Sentinelese. The British arrival with their Indian prisoners to the previously unknown Andaman Islands mirrored the pattern set by Christopher Columbus in 1492 when he brought the first Old World visitors to the New World, bringing diseases like measles, influenza, and smallpox, to which the indigenous populations had no immunity, resulting in devastating consequences similar to those experienced by Native Americans. Additionally, the introduction of alcohol and opium, substances unfamiliar to the indigenous peoples, further compounded the impact. As a result, the indigenous population of Great Andaman, where Port Blair was established, was swiftly replaced by newcomers from the Old World. leading to assimilation or extraction for most of the indigenous survivors. The Jarawa tribe in the far south of Great Andaman and the Sentinelese were exceptions, remaining mostly isolated due to their location on a separate, less strategic island. No outsiders had made contact with them until a British Raj merchant ship accidentally wrecked there in 1867. The 106 British and Indian survivors of the shipwreck reached the beach, thinking it uninhabited, awaiting rescue. However, 3 days later, naked islanders emerged from the jungle and attacked them with arrows. Despite the crew's efforts to defend themselves, they were eventually rescued by the Royal Navy. This violent encounter marked the beginning of contact between our worlds, shaping the relationship for the next century and a half. In 1880, a 19-year-old English aristocrat named Maurice Vidal Portman found himself appointed as the British Crown's administrator of the Andaman Islands and the head of the Port Blair penal colony. Curious about the people he was tasked with governing, he led an expedition to North Sentinel Island. For days, Portman and his team traversed the island, attempting to make contact with the Sentinelese people. Despite their efforts, the Sentinelese remained elusive, only offering fleeting glimpses as they patrolled the jungle. Eventually, the expedition encountered an elderly couple and 4 children. Portman controversially took the 6 individuals back to Port Blair, where the elderly couple succumbed to diseases. Realizing the mistake, Portman returned the children to North Sentinel Island after giving them gifts. Reflecting on the expedition, he admitted in his journal that it was a failure, as it only heightened the islanders' fear and hostility towards outsiders. He concluded that leaving the islanders alone would have been the better course of action. There are theories suggesting that Portman's mishandling of contact between our worlds could be why the Sentinelese have remained hostile to visitors ever since. This theory gains weight when considering that the 4 children he took and later returned might have shared stories about the elderly couple's deaths, potentially blaming outsiders. Moreover, these children might have brought back diseases, unknowingly infecting the tribe and possibly causing deaths. With limited understanding of infections, it's understandable that the Sentinelese could blame outsiders for mysterious illnesses. These verbal stories could have been passed down, morphing into exaggerated legends, cautioning against trusting any future outsiders. Portman visited the island several more times in the late 1880s, but the Sentinelese fiercely defended their independence with great aggression. In 1896, an Indian convict escaped from the penal colony at Port Blair on a makeshift raft and drifted to North Sentinel Island. A British search party found his body on the beach days later, pierced with arrows and his throat cut. The Sentinelese had killed their first known outsider only a few years after Portman's visits, sending a clear message. There were no further visits from the outside world until the Second World War, when the Japanese invaded the Andaman Islands and occupied them for 3 years. It's difficult to determine what exactly they did to the islanders, and possibly the Sentinelese during this time, because the Japanese destroyed all their records before surrendering in 1945. However, the Imperial Japanese Army committed many atrocities elsewhere during the war, and at least 10% of Port Blair's pre-war population died under their occupation, with hundreds tortured. The war's impact reached the edge of the Sentinelese world, and it is possible that Japanese soldiers visited North Sentinel Island, but this remains uncertain. After the war ended in 1947, India gained independence from the British Empire and faced an unusual problem. Some people, like the Sentinelese of North Sentinel Island, were now considered Indian without knowing what India was. The Andaman Islands became part of India after independence, which theoretically made the Sentinelese Indian citizens. However, they had never heard of India and didn't understand this new citizenship. To address this, the Indian government decided to try making peaceful contact with them, though this was expected to be very challenging. In 1974, National Geographic sent a film crew to North Sentinel Island with armed police and a team of experienced anthropologists, including T.N. Pandit, to film a documentary about the Sentinelese called Man in Search of Man. Some of the footage they captured is the only surviving film of the Sentinelese available to the outside world. Their plan was to sail around the island for 3 days, leaving gifts on the beaches to try to gain the trust of the inhabitants. When they navigated through the barrier reef, the Sentinelese came out from the jungle and shot arrows at their boat. Undeterred, the crew sailed to another part of the island and left more gifts, including a toy car, a doll, aluminum cookware, coconuts, and a live pig. Again, the Sentinelese emerged and one of them shot an arrow that hit the documentary director in the thigh. The man who fired the arrow laughed hysterically. To make their point clear, they speared a doll and a pig alive, buried each in the sand, took the coconuts and cookware, and retreated into the jungle. The documentary project failed, and not wanting to escalate things, National Geographic canceled it and withdrew. However, Pandit, the head Indian anthropologist, was undeterred. He continued visiting the island for years, leaving gifts, determined to establish friendly contact with the Sentinelese. He and his team made many recordings of the tribe during their visits and gift drops, and things seemed to be going well. In 1975, he led the King of Belgium on an overnight cruise just offshore from the island. The sight of the ship on the beach must have been bewildering for the Sentinelese. They left the entire ship and its iron on the island, which quickly advanced the Sentinelese to the Iron Age as they scavenged it for iron, tools, and weapons. You can still see the remains of this wreck on Google Earth at the northwestern corner of North Sentinel Island. Meanwhile, Pandit continued his professional efforts to make contact. By 1988, he noticed a Sentinelese man dancing with joy after gifts were left on the beach. A month later, during another visit, he and his team were delivering bags of coconuts when some Sentinelese approached them on the beach, getting within 10 yards. This seemed to be a breakthrough between the two groups. In 1991, Pandit sent Muramala Chattopadhyay, a junior anthropologist, to the island for a routine gift drop. She reported that during this visit, the Sentinelese waded out into the water to accept their gifts for the first time. Chattopadhyay suggested that her presence as a woman signaled to the tribe that her crew was not aggressive, making them more trusting. The following month, Pandit and Chattopadhyay visited North Sentinel Island together and were amazed when about a dozen Sentinelese rushed out to their boat to greet them. Soon after, a significant photograph was taken. Pandit and his team, coming from a modern world, were in the water with the uncontacted Paleolithic hunter-gatherer Sentinelese, each holding the same coconut. This moment was the result of 24 years of Pandit's efforts to establish friendly contact with the Sentinelese. Afterward, Pandit and his team left, thrilled with their success. In 1992, at the age of 58, Pandit faced mandatory retirement and never returned to North Sentinel Island. Shortly after his initial visit, the Indian government banned all future visits to the island. North Sentinel Island was surrounded by a 3 nautical mile wide no-go zone, patrolled by the Indian Navy based at Port Blair. This was done to protect both the Sentinelese and any outsiders who might visit. However, this did not prevent all visits. In 2006, 2 Indian fishermen accidentally drifted into the restricted area while illegally fishing. Their boat ended up on the island's beach. Other fishermen in the area reported seeing Sentinelese people approach the boat with hatchets and kill the 2 men. A helicopter was sent to the island to investigate, but the Sentinelese drove it away with arrows. The Sentinelese allegedly later hung the bodies of 2 men on bamboo poles on the beach, like scarecrows, as a warning to outsiders to stay away. The deaths of the fishermen were never investigated or prosecuted by Indian authorities. No one visited the island again until the fall of 2018, when an American Christian missionary came unprepared. After repeatedly visiting the island over several days, he was also killed by the Sentinelese. His body remains on the island, making him at least the 4th outsider whose remains cannot be recovered. The Indian government grants full legal immunity to the Sentinelese for their actions on the island, including killing anyone who visits, so it's best to stay away. Visiting is not worth risking your life or exposing the Sentinelese to your diseases. They have repeatedly shown over decades that they want to be left alone, and their wishes should be respected. The island is sealed off for a good reason, akin to the Prime Directive from Star Trek. The closest you can get to seeing it is from the Air India flight into or out of Port Blair, which may fly directly over the island, giving you a view into another world. So, thanks for watching this video. Please be sure to share your thoughts, and stay tuned for more content like this.